Habemus Papam. A thunderous cheer echoed across St. Peter's Square as white smoke rose from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, and Cardinal Robert Prevost stepped onto the balcony, officially becoming Pope Laetian. Yet amid the celebration was a current of doubt. Just one day earlier, President Donald Trump had shaken the world by posting a photo of himself wearing a white papal robe, along with a cryptic declaration that he wanted to become the Pope. And then, the very next day, for the first time in history, the Catholic Church elected an American Pope. The first told you this was never just a joke, was it? Our suspicions were only deepened when, last night, we received a letter from a nun describing her sacred near-death experience. In it, she witnessed part of the secret conclave and foresaw 4 shocking events that would unfold after Pope Leo's coronation. Could this be the unfolding of a carefully crafted political scheme? What are the 4 events yet to come? Isn't it strange that the elected cardinal was someone no one expected, not among the commonly predicted names? Pay close attention to every detail in this testimony, because this story doesn't end with a puff of white smoke. Before we begin, please share your name and the city you live in. We want to pray for you, to call your name before the Lord our God, and stand together in faith. If this story stirs your soul, we invite you to be part of the sacred work God is doing through the Eternal Bible Stories channel. By clicking the Super Thanks button below this video, the heart icon, you are offering a financial gift that helps us continue spreading light and truth to thousands more. We are grateful for you and believe that God will remember this. He will return it to you many times over for your generous heart. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do so today so we can continue sharing God's love and light to the ends of the earth. Now, listen closely to her testimony. My name is Maria. I am 58 years old, a cloistered nun who has spent over 30 years of her life in the San Giovanni Monastery, a centuries-old convent perched on a mist-covered hillside in the Florence region of Italy. My entire life has been days of silence, prayer, and repentance, hidden behind the cold stone walls of the monastery. To the world, I have long been dead. But to God, I am still alive, living as a quiet yes whispered in the darkness of faith. On the morning of May 8, 2025, dawn had not yet dispelled the thin mist that cloaked the holy garden, and I was already kneeling in the small chapel. The cold stone floor pierced through the layers of my worn brown habit, and the scent of old candle wax and aged wood blended into a distinct fragrance, the scent of a poor soul offering herself to God, moment by moment. On the stained glass wall, the image of St. Catherine wearing a crown of thorns shimmered faintly in the dim light from the eastern window. I quietly prayed the terce, my heart turned toward Rome, where white smoke had just risen from the Sistine Chapel chimney. Suddenly, the radio in the monastery's parlor crackled through the old, raspy speaker. Habemus Papam, we have a pope, Pope Leo XIV. The triumphant roar of thousands rejoicing in St. Peter's Square echoed, reverberating even to the vaulted ceiling of our monastery. But within me, there was no such joy. My heart felt as if someone had placed a slab of stone weighing 1,000 pounds upon it, pressing until I could barely breathe. A dark and powerful foreboding rang in my soul like a tolling bell in a thunderstorm. Something was not right. A chill wind, from no clear source, swept through the crack beneath the door and rushed straight down my spine, and I knew this was no ordinary wind. I tried to take a deep breath to dispel the rising unease, but immediately my chest tightened with a stabbing pain like an invisible dagger plunging into my heart. I clutched my chest, my whole body trembling, then collapsed onto the stone floor. My breath became ragged, each inhale was a flame scorching my lungs. In my mind I heard a whisper, Lord, please, don't leave me. My vision faded. The sounds outside dissolved like waves retreating into the sea. All I could hear was the faint, faltering beat of my heart, and then silence. In that moment I knew I had left my body. I did not see myself ascending to heaven, nor did I fall into an abyss. There was only a boundless space without color, without sound, without form. No exit, no beginning, and even less an end. Where was I? Was this purgatory, or the void itself? My soul floated in a thick darkness, like a mist so dense it could not be torn. and then a voice resounded. It was not the voice of man, not harsh, not hurried, yet it held such a strange authority that all fear within me vanished. That voice was warm like a springtime stream, yet powerful as thunder. "Maria, come to me." A sudden burst of light flared up blindingly white-blue like a flame that did not burn, sweeping away the darkness that had engulfed me. I squinted, trying to see more clearly, and then, right before my eyes, appeared a breathtaking sight, a towering angel standing firm. His robe shimmered as if woven from starlight. He had no distinct face, but his voice was majestic, like waves crashing against cliffs, echoing through the stillness. "I have been sent to show you what will come after the one the world praises." That voice, both powerful and gentle, made my heart pound wildly, as if it might burst from my chest. I smelled a faint trace of sea salt on the wind, blending with a low, resonant sound like an ancient prayer. Trembling, I fought to hold back the fear rising within me and whispered, "Leo the 14th." The angel did not respond. He simply raised his hand high before me. Suddenly, from that gesture, a massive gate of light opened, radiating a dazzling glow. The chill of the spirit realm seeped into every cell of my body. Fear and awe mixed within me, making me instinctively step back. But the angel's unwavering gaze gave me strength. "I will show you the truth." The voice rang out again, this time echoing through the space, as if every particle of air resonated with it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. A wave of uncertainty rose in my heart. Could someone as small and humble as I, just a nun, truly be worthy of witnessing something so divine and majestic? I wanted to ask more, but no words came out. I wondered whether I had the courage to face what was to come. But then, a powerful urge from deep within pushed me forward. Gently but firmly, I moved closer to the gate of light, now wide open before me. My feet felt as if they touched clouds, moving without any sense of weight. My heart still pounded wildly, but I knew there was no turning back. As I stepped across the threshold, a warm light enveloped me, as though I were passing through a thin veil between two worlds. I turned to look at the angel. His eyes burned like a brilliant flame, not with anger, but with an overwhelming sense of solemnity. The angel followed and spoke once more, slowly and with finality. "What you are about to see will change everything you believe. Prepare your mind, for the truth may break your heart. But do not fear, for truth always carries its own sacred worth." I nodded, a quiet sense of trust rising within me. I knew there was no returning to the path I once walked. I had entered a journey predestined by God, and now, even in fear, I was ready to face the truth, no matter how harsh it might be. Before I could grasp what was happening, the scene around me shifted abruptly. The blinding light faded, giving way to a grand and imposing room. The ceiling stretched high above, glittering with golden reflections from a classic chandelier hanging in the center. Soft beams of pale yellow light poured down, illuminating a polished wooden floor so clean it mirrored my trembling silhouette was standing there. The rich scent of mahogany blended with the thick aroma of cigar smoke, filling the air with a luxurious, carefully curated atmosphere. As I looked around, there was no mistaking it. This was the President of the United States office, the Oval Office of the White House. At the center of the room stood Donald Trump, upright behind the large, resolute desk. In his right hand, he held a smartphone, while his left rested lightly on the edge of the desk, the knuckles pale from a tight grip. Though it was only a fleeting moment, I could feel an invisible tension, taut as a drawn bowstring, stretching across the entire space. His gaze, icy and calculating, was like twin steel blades cutting through the darkness. He didn't look at me, nor at anything else in the room, focusing solely on the phone screen in his hand. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse and deliberate, like a curse murmured behind locked doors. "Make sure everything goes according to plan." That voice, seemingly calm, sent chills rippling through my entire body. Every word, every syllable, sank deep into my bones. What plan? With whom? For what purpose? A heavy fog of dread settled around me, thick and suffocating. The smell of cigar smoke grew stronger, as if the tension and schemes in Trump's mind were seeping into the very air of the room. I strained to see the phone, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was on the other end. but the screen was cloaked in a ghostly mist, obscuring all details. One thing, however, was certain: this conversation was far from ordinary. Suddenly, the scene was torn apart as if by an unseen force, pulling me into a completely different space. I could feel an icy draft creeping into every fold of my clothing. Before me now was a sealed chamber with no windows. The only light came from flickering red candles, casting eerie shadows across the room. The deep crimson robes of the cardinals glowed faintly in the dim light, making them appear like ghostly figures gliding through the midnight air. They stood in a circle, heads slightly bowed, whispering to each other in a language heavy with secrecy and calculated intent. The candlelight danced across the ancient stone walls, casting overlapping shadows that resembled restless spirits moving between the world of the living and the dead. Before I could gather my thoughts, a deep, commanding voice echoed from behind me. "He must be one of ours." Startled, I spun around, but there was no one there. My heart pounded, as if trying to escape my chest. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. That sentence, short but resolute, felt like a blade etching itself into the stone wall of everything I had once believed. Who were they talking about? Who were they choosing for a role so sacred only God himself should decide? The chill didn't come from the air, but from the distortion of truth itself, from the sinister plots hiding behind priestly robes. I looked back at the circle of cardinals, each one nodding slowly, each bearing a different expression, yet all sharing one stance: agreement. I tried to move closer to hear more clearly, but the sounds began to fade, swallowed by some invisible void. The space around me turned hazy, as if the truth itself was being smothered beneath a thick veil, one no human was meant to pierce. And then, once again, the scene changed. This time, a smartphone screen lit up before me. On it was a social media post from Donald Trump. The image was staggering. He wore a white robe identical to the Pope's, his head tilted slightly, lips curled into a victorious smile. Beneath the photo was a single line of text: "I am the real Pope." A crowd appeared behind the image, laughing. But the laughter wasn't joyful. It was a bizarre mixture of mockery, derision, and something else cold and familiar, like a world long resigned to deception. I stood frozen. A chill slid down my spine like an icy serpent. Was this a joke? Or was it the next move in a far deeper scheme than anything I had ever feared? Why that robe? Why that sacred throne? An angel appeared beside me, not in radiant glory, but in solemn form, with mournful eyes gazing into the distance. His voice broke the silence, soft yet weighted with the burden of all heaven. "The truth is hidden behind ambition." That warning struck like thunder splitting the sky. I didn't just hear it, I felt each word carved deep into my soul. A shiver ran through me as I lifted my gaze toward the applauding crowd, toward a spectacle where falsehood was celebrated as triumph. I asked myself, has the throne of Peter been seized by worldly hands? Has a faith rooted in millennia been traded for a fleeting political ambition? I lowered my head, heart weighed down by what I had just seen and heard. My lips trembled, and I uttered a prayer, a desperate plea sent heavenward. "Lord, please protect your church. Please enlighten those who are being led astray by power and ambition." But around me, only silence replied. The divine sounds had faded. The warmth of celestial light was gone. What remained was a coldness that sank into my very core, as if this sacred realm had been overtaken by an ancient shadow. I stood there still, my fingers clenching the folds of my robe, confusion tearing at me, torn between faith and fear. The angel said nothing more, only stood beside me in silence, like a loyal sentinel guarding the thin line between sanctity and betrayal, between light and darkness. In that strange dream, I stood in a mysterious realm where light and darkness intertwined like an unfinished painting. Beside me was an angel with a majestic presence, whose eyes burned like torches that consumed all falsehood. The angel spoke in a deep and solemn voice, each word piercing straight into my mind like an arrow. "I will show you the great deception that is coming." A cold wind swept through, as if it were carrying everything away. The scene shifted abruptly, and before my eyes appeared a grand church with ancient architecture and a towering, solemn dome. But the atmosphere was strange, gloomy and cold, as though the very soul of the church was bound in suffocating stillness. From the high ceiling hung old chandeliers, whose dim light seemed choked by an invisible darkness. I stepped inside and felt an eerie silence. The smell of old paper and ash filled my nose, like remnants of forgotten sermons buried by time. Thousands of clergy stood in long rows, stretching from the entrance to the altar, all wearing pure white robes. Yet strangely, their eyes were empty, lifeless, no longer reflecting the light of faith. I felt as though I was standing among a host of puppets, waiting for orders but utterly devoid of life. At the pulpit, a young priest appeared. His appearance was solemn, but his gaze was cold and emotionless. His voice rang out steady, yet hollow, boldly declaring, "Everyone is right, no one needs to change. We are all light. There is no error, no sin to atone for." His words struck me like lightning to the heart. The entire space trembled, as if the church itself shuddered at such blasphemy. I looked toward the altar, where a Bible lay open, but to my horror, the pages were faded, the text faint, and many passages had been altered, no longer the true word of God. The words had become vague, indulgent, pleasing to the ear, instead of guiding souls toward truth. I turned toward the congregation. They knelt on the cold stone floor, heads bowed in murmured prayer. But their eyes no longer shone with faith, they were clouded with confusion, like a flock of lost sheep. Their prayers no longer rang out strong and fervent, but had become a weak ripple, breaking apart in the still air. Suddenly, from the corner of the church, an old priest shakily stepped forward. He held in his hands an old Bible, its pages yellowed with time. His eyes were bloodshot, but they still gleamed with a steadfast light. He stood there, his trembling hands clutching the book as if holding on to a precious legacy, and then he burst into tears, his sobs cutting through the suffocating silence like a knife. "This is not the word of God. This is a lie." His voice echoed in the stillness, but the crowd did not listen. They turned to look at him with contempt, whispering that he was mad. The young priest on the pulpit remained unfazed, simply smiling faintly and calmly responding, "The times have changed, Father. We need to adapt." His words struck my heart like a dagger. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face, unable to contain the pain. A sense of helplessness overwhelmed me as I saw the lies openly replacing the word of God. The angel still stood beside me, his eyes burning brightly like two flames consuming the deception. His voice was solemn but resolute. "When the truth is diluted, it can no longer save. A faith that is mixed will no longer be true faith." I wanted to scream, to warn everyone, but my voice seemed to be swept away by the wind, blending into the howling storm coming from the stained glass windows. Finally, I looked back at the old priest. He was kneeling, clutching the Bible to his chest, like a final treasure, tears running down his wrinkled face. I understood that he had exhausted himself in the battle to defend the truth. The angel placed a hand on my shoulder, his gaze sorrowful yet firm. "Will the church awaken before it is consumed by lies? When the truth is altered, people will lose the ability to distinguish between light and darkness." I nodded, my heart filled with sorrow. Together with the angel, I continued to walk, stepping into the thickening darkness, where the truth was hidden beneath layers of false glitter. I knew I would witness even more terrifying things, and in my heart I prayed fervently that the church might return to the truth before it was too late. The angel stood beside me, saying nothing, only gazing ahead with a profound and solemn look. A beam of bluish-white light suddenly burst forth, tearing through the surrounding darkness. I felt as though I was being drawn into a vortex of that light, everything around me turning hazy. When the light stabilized, I realized I was standing inside a auditorium. The space was dazzlingly bright. White and gold drapes hung everywhere, cascading from the ceiling down to the floor. Light from above shimmered like thousands of stars. A sweet fragrance drifted in from somewhere, blending with the air, a scent that felt comforting yet oddly unsettling. On a lavishly decorated stage stood rows of individuals dressed in white robes, their hands lifted toward the sky. At the center stood a tall, middle-aged man with silver hair, his eyes glowing with a strange, almost supernatural intensity. Those on stage called themselves the prophets of renewal, bearers of light, promising salvation from a world in chaos. Their voices rose in rhythmic unison, resembling ancient prayers, yet they lacked the warmth of true sincerity. Each word they spoke sent a subtle shiver through the crowd below, as if their every phrase seeped into the very marrow of those who heard them. The audience knelt, their eyes gleaming as they gazed up at the stage like sheep having found their shepherd. Hands were clasped and lips murmured prayers in unison with the prophets. I looked more closely and was struck by a startling realization. There was no cross on the stage, no symbol of God's holiness to be seen anywhere. A chill ran through me, like an icy breath creeping into my flesh. The stage's light was too intense, so blinding it felt suffocating. I tried to peer into the eyes of the robe-clad figures, but all I saw was emptiness and cold. Their eyes were like mirrors without reflection, revealing nothing but the hollow void within themselves. The chants of praise grew louder, echoing throughout the hall. Those below began lifting their hands high, as if trying to grasp that blinding light. In that moment, I felt I had stumbled into a strange ritual, where everyone was hypnotized by artificial light, led far away from the truth. A turbulent feeling erupted inside me. I wanted to scream, to warn them that this light did not come from God. But even as I tried to make a sound, my throat tightened, silencing me. I looked around, desperately searching for any sign of truth, but all I could see were faces lost in a trance of blind fanaticism. At that very moment, a small voice rose from within the crowd. I followed the sound and saw a young girl stand up, clutching a rosary tightly in her hands. Her long hair flowed over her shoulders, and her eyes shone like a candle flame in the heart of the night. She stepped out of line and stood tall, unafraid. I stood still, barely breathing, fearing that her presence might be extinguished like a small flame in a violent storm. But she did not waver. There was something in her eyes, an unwavering resolve, as if a strength had descended upon her from heaven. She didn't need to speak many words. Her gaze alone told me that she had seen through the deception long before I had. The crowd around her began to stir. Some people stepped back, murmuring among themselves. Yet others looked at her with anger, as if she had desecrated something sacred. A burly man stepped forward, yanked the rosary from her hands, and threw it to the ground. The girl knelt down, picked it up without hesitation. In that moment, the light in her eyes shone brighter than ever, as if defying all the surrounding darkness. Amid the dazzling space, she remained the small yet enduring flame that refused to go out. I could feel the courage burning in her heart, like a silent yet powerful call. The angel beside me bowed his head slightly, his eyes filled with deep thought. I turned to him, heavy-hearted. "Can the true light be hidden by this false one?" The angel said nothing, but I sensed the compassion in his gaze. Not everyone has the courage to speak the truth when the false light shines too brightly. I closed my eyes and prayed for the young girl, hoping that the light within her would never be extinguished, no matter how much the world rejected it. When I opened my eyes, the auditorium was still crowded, and the chants of praise continued without end. But amid that crowd, the young girl still stood firm, her gaze unwavering, clutching the rosary like an indelible mark. And I knew that as long as there were people like her, the true light would never die. The bluish-white light from the angel's hand flashed once more, pulling me out of reality and into a boundless realm where everything spun like a whirlwind, swept up in shimmering light. When I opened my eyes, I found myself standing before a massive hall, magnificent and majestic like a grand palace in the heart of the modern world. Golden and white ribbons hung down from colossal marble pillars, glittering in the radiant glow of crystal chandeliers suspended from the towering vaulted ceiling. The polished granite floor gleamed like a mirror lake, reflecting every beam of light, adding a mystical and solemn atmosphere. Behind the stage, a strange symbol adorned the wall, a sun and moon intertwined within a cross, emitting a sparkling yet cold light, like a foreboding omen. In that vast space, people from every corner of the world gathered, walking slowly along wide aisles, bearing colorful flags that represented the religions of the world. They stood in separate groups, heads held high, eyes fixed on the stage. Their faces were filled with anticipation, but in their eyes, something was missing, something vague, a lack of sincere faith. The air was thick with the scent of burning beeswax and incense, creating a sense of solemnity, yet also weighing heavily like a mysterious curse. On the grand stage stood rows of religious leaders, each adorned in their distinct traditional garments, shimmering with fine silk and metallic threads. Their expressions were solemn, but lacked the peace usually seen in those who walk in true faith. At the center of the stage, on a large table covered in white cloth, lay an open document. One by one, the leaders stepped forward and signed it with firm, decisive strokes, as if to affirm an unchangeable decision. Above the document, a golden inscription read, "Unite humanity in peace." As the final signature was penned, the crowd erupted in applause. The sound echoed off the stone walls, spreading like waves that drowned out all thought. Chants of peace, unity, rang out like a collective prayer, yet they lacked warmth, lacked the heartbeat of souls brimming with faith. An elderly bishop, with a gaunt yet dignified figure, wearing a white robe trimmed with gold, slowly knelt at the center of the stage. He raised a long, intricately carved staff, its head bearing the strange emblem of the religious alliance, glowing brightly under the lights. The bishop walked toward Pope Leo XIV, bowing deeply, as if offering his entire faith and loyalty. The Pope received the staff, his pale hands gripping it firmly, a faint smile brushing his lips, yet his eyes remained cold and empty, like ice. I stood there, my heart weighed down, as if barbed wire were wrapping tightly around it. The cries of peace, unity, continued to echo, but there was no warmth, no emotion. The crowd seemed entranced by a dream of false peace, lost in a faith they believed was right. Amidst that sea of people, I suddenly caught sight of a small, trembling figure in the crowd. It was a young nun, her face pale, eyes reddened with tears, clutching a worn-out Bible tightly in her hands. In that frenzied atmosphere, her faint voice rang out like a desperate plea. "This is not the will of God." But her words were quickly drowned out by the fanatical cheers. A tall man nearby turned to her, glaring with fury, then shoved her as if she had committed something vile. She staggered but held tightly to her book as if it were the last truth amidst the storm of lies. I wanted to rush to protect her, but my legs felt frozen, unable to move. The angel beside me remained silent, his gaze firm like an immovable pillar. In my ear, his voice spoke low, sorrowful, but resolute. "Unity without truth is the beginning of global compromise." A vague fear stirred within me. I looked again toward Pope Leo XIV, clearly seeing the cold, distant smile on his face. The staff of the alliance in his hands radiated a strange light, as if it were devouring all genuine faith. The crowd below continued to cheer, unaware that the peace they were celebrating was merely a disguise for a deeper scheme. I recalled the words of Jesus, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." If truth is abandoned, can peace still be real, or is it only a mask of deceit? The angel placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice deep and commanding. "You must witness it all." I nodded, trying to contain the pain inside. I knew I could not turn away from the truth, even if it broke me. The angel's eyes still shone brightly in the darkness, reminding me that only truth can set mankind free from the shadow of compromise. The light from the alliance symbol began to fade, the vision blurred, but one question still pressed heavily on my heart. Had the church forgotten Christ in its quest for false peace? In the dream, I found myself pulled into a dark, deep place, as if being sucked into a bottomless abyss. The air in the underground chamber was suffocating, thick with the stench of damp earth and dried blood, a horrific blend that made it hard to breathe. My heart pounded violently in my chest, as if crushed by an unnamed terror and despair. A faint light filtered down through a crack in the rocky ceiling, flickering like dying candles in a storm, struggling to resist the overwhelming darkness. I moved forward quietly, my legs trembling over the cold, hard ground. Each step felt like treading through sorrow and grief. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I gradually discerned pale, emaciated faces, eyes sunken and devoid of light. These were the true believers imprisoned here, labeled as extremists simply for holding fast to the truth and refusing to submit to pressure. They were no longer allowed to worship publicly, no longer permitted to gather in the churches that had once been their spiritual refuge. Many had been dragged from their own homes that had once echoed with heartfelt prayers, now reduced to terrifying silence and emptiness. In a dark corner of the damp cell, I saw a group of people kneeling on the cold ground. Elderly women clutched their rosaries tightly, their lips moving in whispered prayers. Their voices were hoarse, barely audible, yet firm as if every word was the last thread holding them upright in the storm of persecution. At the center of the group was an old woman with snow-white hair. Her wrinkled face bore deep marks of time. Her frail hands trembled, blood dripping from small wounds, forming dark red stains on the cold stone floor. Though worn out and in pain, her eyes still shone with unshakable faith, fixed on the flickering candlelight in front of her, as if it were the last ember of belief still burning. The old woman began to pray, her voice weak but full of power. "Lord, forgive them. Have mercy on those who do not know what they are doing." I was overwhelmed, my tears falling silently, mixing with the dried blood on the frozen ground. I knelt beside her, trying to grasp her frail hand, feeling the warmth of her unwavering faith radiating through the cold. A cold gust of wind swept through, and the candle before me flickered, as if about to die out, a signal of how fragile hope had become amid the night's storm. Pain and despair surged within me, and I cried out, my voice cracking. "Lord, where are you? Why must those who are faithful to you suffer like this?" Behind me, the angel remained silent, his eyes deep and still, like a tranquil lake in the midst of a hurricane. His voice rose, low and resonant, like an echo from the realm of heaven. "He is here in these candles." I turned and looked at the small candle still flickering. Though faint, its light had not gone out. The angel's words were a reminder of the power of faith, that even in the darkest of places, there are flames that refuse to be extinguished. Amid the stillness, I heard a gentle voice singing clear, pure, yet full of resolve. A young woman, her hands bound in chains, was singing a hymn. Her voice flowed like a spring, winding through every crack in the stone walls, dispelling the thick fog of hopelessness. Her face was pale, dark circles beneath sleepless eyes, yet her gaze remained steady, without a trace of fear. Gradually, those around her began to join in. Their voices were faint, but each note carried strength, like candles passing fire to one another. The prison chamber suddenly lit up with warmth, the hymn echoing like a declaration of faith, pushing back the oppressive darkness. The angel turned to me, eyes filled with compassion and unshakable conviction. "Remember their steadfastness. True faith never dies when even one heart dares to sing in the dark." I stood silent, awe filling my soul. Though frail and imprisoned, these people held on to their faith like sacred torches that could never be extinguished. As I left the underground chamber, I looked back at their resolute faces, their radiant eyes, bodies weak, yet spirits stronger than ever. In my heart I prayed, "Lord, protect these keepers of the truth. Even if they are persecuted, they remain the light of the world." The angel gently touched my shoulder, his voice ringing like a final decree. "You must carry this message back. The world needs to know that true faith never dies, even when crushed under the weight of darkness." I nodded, feeling a surge of strength rise within me. I knew I had to tell this story so the world would understand that even in the night of persecution, true faith remains a light that can never be extinguished. Once again, I found myself standing in the middle of a vast square where a vibrant festival was underway. Everywhere, flags fluttered in the wind, lively music filled the air, and colorful ribbons hung high, shimmering in the sunlight. People dressed in bright clothes gathered in cheerful groups, holding bread and fresh flowers, their faces lit with joyous smiles. The sweet scent of baked goods blended with the fragrance of chrysanthemums and roses that lined the cobblestone streets. That festive atmosphere seemed to drown out every worry. Groups of people sang songs of peace together, filling the air with excitement and hope. Banners hung above with glittering words, "Peace for all," and "Love erases all divisions," shimmering under the bright light. Yet in the midst of that jubilant scene, I felt a strange contrast. A cold wind suddenly blew through, carrying with it the faint metallic smell of blood. I shivered and turned to the angel beside me. He said nothing, only looked toward the far end of the square, where a small group had gathered. I walked closer, weaving through the cheering crowd. As I drew near, I saw a young priest in a torn black cassock standing at the center of a hostile circle. Blood streaked down his back, and his shoulders trembled as if he had just endured a brutal beating. Struggling to stay upright, he clutched an old Bible with both hands, his voice hoarse yet unwavering. "There is only one God." The crowd around him howled and shouted like provoked beasts. A burly man with a flushed face picked up a stone and hurled it at the priest's back. A harsh thud echoed as the blow landed. His body wavered, but he refused to fall. A blonde-haired woman nearby screamed, "Extremist! He's destroying our peace." Others continued to hurl stones, shouting curses. There were bursts of cruel laughter, murmurs of agreement, but no one stepped in to help him. My heart clenched. Tears welled up in my eyes. I wanted to run to protect him, but my feet felt rooted to the cold stone ground. The angel beside me looked at me, his eyes full of solemn silence. Then his voice rang out, not loud, but cutting like a blade into my soul. "A church that refuses to suffer for the truth is no longer the body of Christ." Those words jolted me awake. I looked again at the young priest. There was still a faint light burning in his eyes, like a candle refusing to be snuffed out, even as his body bore the weight of pain. With each stone thrown, he only clutched the Bible tighter, his lips moving in what seemed to be silent prayer. Suddenly, from behind, a thin child in a worn-out shirt rushed forward and grabbed the priest's hand. The child looked at the crowd, eyes shining brightly, and spoke with a clear, youthful voice. "Father is right. There is only one God." The crowd was stunned, their fury halting for a brief moment, but then laughter erupted again, harsher, more mocking than before. The man who had thrown the stone earlier shouted, "A bunch of lunatics, get them out of here." Yet the young priest did not retreat. His eyes, full of determination, seemed to burn with a sacred fire that no hatred could extinguish. He knelt down, wrapped his arms around the child, and whispered a prayer. The child showed no fear, embracing him tightly, as if seeking comfort from a true father. I knelt down as well, letting the tears flow freely. In that moment I understood that true faith does not lie in eloquent words or hollow slogans of peace. True faith is resilient in trials. It is a small flame that never goes out. Then came the angel's whispered words, like a final message. Will the world recognize this mask of peace before it's too late? The square once again filled with music and laughter. The crowd turned and walked away, leaving the priest and the child alone in the chilling emptiness. The scent of fresh flowers still lingered faintly, but to me it was the smell of blood that revealed the raw truth behind this festival. I looked up to the heavens and prayed that God would protect those who remain faithful, even if the world calls them extremists or madmen. For in their small, steadfast faith, I saw that God was still present, silent, humble, yet unshackably powerful. I found myself stepping into a dense forest, shrouded in darkness, the scent of rotting dry leaves and mist lingering among the gaunt tree trunks. The silence was so profound that I could hear the faint rustle of the canopy as a gentle breeze passed through. I walked along the uneven dirt path, my bare feet feeling the cold seep into every fiber of my being. In the distance, through the darkness, I saw small flickers of firelight, like solitary fireflies in the night. I approached cautiously, keeping my breathing steady so as not to disturb the still sober fragile peace. It was a group of believers gathered around a campfire, their faces gaunt but their eyes still shining with steadfast faith. The sound of hymns rose, not grand but merely whispers, trembling yet warm. The song resounded like a prayer, carrying the yearnings of souls seeking light in the darkness. I listened to every word, laden with pain but also full of surrender, like a small stream weaving through a parched, deep forest. Near the fire, a young mother sat cradling her child in her arms. The child, about 5 years old, had large, round eyes that sparkled, reflecting the firelight. Her soft voice rang out, full of innocence and confusion. "Is God still there, Mama?" The mother hugged her child tighter, her eyes glistening with the hope she struggled to hold on to. "He is in your heart." I looked at the mother and child, my heart tightening. I understood that their faith was not a blazing fire, but a quiet, persistent flame, warming their souls amidst the storms of the world. An old man sat nearby, his trembling hands breaking dry bread into small pieces to share with those around him. The bread was so hard it required a knife to cut into tiny portions. His frail hands seemed to battle exhaustion, yet his eyes still gleamed with unshakable faith. He handed the mother a piece of bread, his hoarse voice gentle and kind. "God sustains us through the darkness." My eyes stung, and a deep sense of gratitude welled up within me. These people, though fleeing, though hiding in the depths of the forest, still held the fire of faith in their hearts. They needed no eloquent sermons or grandiose rituals, only a small spark, a hymn, and a promise from God that He was still there. The angel stood beside me, his thoughtful eyes fixed on the scene. He bowed his head, his voice like the wind whispering through the deep forest. "He is still there, and they are the proof." I wanted to step closer, to embrace these people, to join them in singing hymns of faith. But the angel pulled me away, his gaze stern. "You must see the final event." I turned back one last time, watching those small figures like silent torches in the darkness. I knew that no matter how the world changed, those faithful souls would continue to burn brightly, never fading. The silhouettes of the believers huddled together, sharing warmth from the small fire, their gentle but resolute songs still echoing in the air. I wondered, would the world recognize these silent torches? Would anyone understand that, in the darkest moments, it was their humility and trust that shone as the true light? I left my heart heavy yet strengthened. Even if everything were to crumble, those silent torches would remain, burning steadfastly through the long night, carrying hope and an unquenchable faith. I prayed silently, "Lord, please uphold their faith. Though darkness may envelop them, let your light forever shine upon them." The Vatican Square was packed, millions of people crowded together, the scent of fresh flowers and incense enveloping the air, mingling with deafening cheers. From a distance, I saw a long procession entering the square, the flickering light from countless candles twinkling like small stars in the darkness. In a state of fervor, the crowd surged forward, raising banners, flags, and crosses, all directed toward the grand balcony of the basilica. The new pope appeared, draped in a shimmering white robe, the light reflecting brilliantly off the jewels in his crown. The cheers erupted, as if they could tear the night sky apart. Suddenly an unexpected miracle occurred. Blind eyes saw light, and the lame, dragging their frail legs, stood up and walked. Radiant beams of light streaked through the air like divine rays descending from above. The people fell to the ground, weeping, hailing the new pope as a living saint. Majestic music resounded, the atmosphere filled with joy, awe, and trust. But I stood there frozen, an indescribable unease rising within me. My heart shuddered, as if gripped by a massive, icy block. I stared at the Pope from afar. His eyes blazed brightly, but were lifeless, empty, like those of a moving statue. In a fleeting moment, I realized something was terribly wrong. There was no warmth, no life, only a blinding, artificial brilliance. The angel beside me, his gaze stern, spoke. "This miracle is not from heaven." I looked up, seeing the light from the Pope's eyes spreading, enveloping the frenzied crowd, but behind that radiant glow was a profound darkness, like black ink spilling across the white stone of the square. The sight reminded me of meticulously staged plays, where perfect actors played the role of saviors, but concealed behind them was the hand of a puppeteer. Amid the crowd, a small girl stood silently, clutching her rosary tightly, her eyes shining as if she sensed something. Unlike the others, she did not kneel, she simply stood still, her gaze fixed on the Pope with deep suspicion. In the midst of the dazzling scene, she was a poignant pause, heavy with unease. I wondered, could this reverence have been orchestrated by a force beyond the truth? What lay behind the radiant glow? I dared not entertain the possibility that some worldly power had interfered with the throne, creating a symbol of authority devoid of the spirit. At that moment I recalled warnings from years past about the interference of political forces in the church, about the unpredictable connection between spiritual and worldly power. I couldn't help but think of long-term plans, meticulously arranged like a grand chessboard, with pieces moved by an invisible hand. The Pope stood there, amidst countless praises, but his presence brought no peace. On the contrary, I felt a heavy pressure, as if the faith of millions was being exploited to serve a greater agenda. A voice echoed in my mind, "This is not God." I stood frozen, tears streaming down my face. The angel beside me nodded in agreement. "The truth is hidden behind ambition. You must warn them." I turned to look at the crowd, prostrating themselves, praising the new pope without realizing their faith was being tested. I understood that this was not merely a religious issue but a profound political one, where a hidden power could transform a sacred symbol into a tool to manipulate humanity's trust. It seemed everyone was swept up in the grandeur of power, mistaking it for the light of truth. But I knew that if they did not awaken, humanity would lose its way, led into darkness without even realizing it. Would the world have the wisdom to recognize that sometimes what glitters is not true light? I silently prayed, hoping that someone, like the girl with shining eyes, would see through this deception before it was too late. Would the world awaken in time before darkness fully enveloped it? I wondered, amidst the cheering crowd, would anyone have the courage to stand and declare they did not believe in miracles born of worldly power? The angel looked at me, his deep voice resounding amidst the fervent atmosphere warned them. "Do not let faith be turned into a tool of worldly forces." The angel lifted me high, piercing through the thick night, the space dense, as if swallowed by darkness. From this vantage point I looked down upon the world, seeing a web of interwoven lights, radiant yet distorted, like a trap-laden net waiting to ensnare. The faint smell of sulfur wafted by, acrid, like the breath of darkness seeping into the mortal realm. Every hair on my body stood on end, my skin chilled. Below, in the vast square, the crowd remained packed, prostrating and cheering in fervent ecstasy. The light from the miracles still danced, weaving enchanting illusions that captivated everyone's minds. I stared closely, gradually realizing that this light was impure. It brought no peace, but seemed molded, twisted, and reshaped by some unseen hand, making everything dazzling yet chaotic. The angel stood beside me, eyes stern, speaking in a deep voice. "This is not a miracle from heaven. This light is deception, an ancient sorcery revived." I turned to the angel, my heart heavy. Ancient sorcery? Why was there a mingling of the holy and the profane in the same space? I tried to grasp the feeling, but only fear enveloped me. Suddenly I saw a colossal pitch-black gate adorned with strange symbols. The false light from the miracle seemed to be drawn into it, creating delicate, spiderweb-like rays that spread across the square. From the other side of the gate, darkness slowly seeped, blending with the light, crafting a chillingly artificial scene. The new pope still stood there, raising his arms as if commanding the crowd's fervor. I sensed a connection between him and the dark gate, as though he wielded power from an invisible force to create this bizarre illusion. I wondered, was the pope playing a dangerous game? Positioning himself at the boundary between light and darkness, conjuring miracles to win the crowd's adoration. I tried to make sense of it, but found only emptiness, as if a plan had been meticulously laid out long ago, from the moment the Vatican's throne was touched by political forces. Suddenly, a young girl stepped forward from the crowd, clutching an old cross, her eyes shining like a candle in the wind. She stood tall, facing the Pope without fear. She shouted, her voice ringing like a bell, "Only God is the truth." Her cry echoed, briefly halting the crowd. People turned to look at her with eyes both astonished and angry. Suddenly, several men in uniforms rushed forward, dragging her away. She resisted, still gripping the cross, her eyes full of resolve. "You are not God. You have no right to alter the truth." My heart clenched, my throat bitter. I wanted to rush down to help her, but the angel held me back, gently saying, "That is the strength of the faithful. They need no protection, for God is within them." In the girl's eyes I saw an unyielding faith that could not be subdued. I silently prayed for her, for all those who dared to stand for the truth, even as that truth was being distorted, even as the light was slowly overtaken by darkness. The Pope showed no unease at the commotion, continuing to raise his hands like a benevolent leader, skillfully restoring order amidst the chaos. But I saw a faint smirk flicker across his face, the smile of someone secure in their power. knowing that despite a few dissenting voices, the crowd remained enthralled. The angel turned to me, his eyes stern yet holding a fragile glimmer of hope. God grants humanity free will. The adversary will use that freedom to manipulate, but the faithful will always hold the light in their souls. You are chosen to speak the truth. I nodded, though my heart was shattered. I understood that I was not merely confronting an individual but an intricate system, woven between faith and ambition. I would not stay silent, no matter the cost. The truth could not be buried by worldly power. I looked back at the young girl being dragged away, the light in her eyes still blazing like an inextinguishable torch. I told myself I will speak, even if the world does not listen. The angel stood beside me, his voice deep but resolute. You are chosen. I stepped into a sacred space, vast and magnificent like a celestial cathedral. The air carried the faint scent of salt and lilies, gentle yet melancholic. Blinding light radiated from blazing torches lining the long corridor, casting glows on the pristine white marble walls. Angels sat around the chamber, their demeanor solemn, their wings spread wide, their radiance like pure water flowing through the space. My mind was flooded with awe and confusion. Before me, a massive scroll unfurled on a great stone table, its pages shimmering with golden light, like morning sunlight filtering through stained glass. Each line was etched deeply, like ancient carvings, chronicling every day, every decision of the church across centuries. The pages trembled slightly, as if an invisible hand were turning them. I approached timidly, straining to read the ethereal script. A name appeared before my eyes, glowing in brilliant gold, Leo XIV. Beneath it were decisions, agreements, documents confirming alliances with worldly powers. The ink seemed fresh, not yet dry, as if they had been signed recently. To my right I saw towering figures standing in rows. Cardinals, priests, and those deemed pillars of the church all stood motionless, their eyes vacant like soulless wooden dolls. On their chests golden crosses gleamed but offered no comfort, mere lifeless ornaments, shining yet hollow. Suddenly I recognized a familiar face in the crowd. It was Father Antonio, the priest I had always revered, who stood for truth and prayed ceaselessly for the church's purity. But now he was bound, kneeling before the divine tribunal, his face pale, yet his eyes resolute. Blood dripped from his hands, staining the pure white stone floor crimson. I cried out, "Father Antonio!" But no one heard. The angel beside me gazed forward, his eyes sorrowful yet steadfast. I turned to him, my voice choked. Why is he treated this way? He is a guardian of truth. The angel did not answer immediately, only looked ahead silently. Father Antonio remained bowed, each drop of blood falling like the final prayers of a steadfast soul. I wanted to rush to his side, to embrace him and share his pain, but my feet felt bound, unable to move. At last, an angel with wings of blazing fire stepped forward, his majestic voice echoing through the space. "Those who signed this deceitful covenant, do you know whom you have betrayed? You have let worldly power overshadow the truth, turning the sacred throne into a tool of the world." Suddenly, a brilliant light erupted from the scroll, shining directly on those who had signed. The other angels bowed, their wings spreading in a ritual of judgment. Father Antonio looked up, his eyes radiant without regret, his lips whispering a final prayer. "Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do." A powerful gust from the void swept through, scattering the scroll's pages, tearing them into fragments like crushed dry leaves. I fell to my knees, sobbing in despair. "God, where are you? Please save your church." But only silence answered, heavy and profound. The angel placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle yet laden with deep sorrow. The choice was not mine, but theirs. They used their freedom to reject the truth. My heart felt as though it were shattered into pieces. How could a church built on the foundation of Christ fall so far? Why was the truth buried beneath the dust of power? I looked at the angel, searching for a glimmer of hope. Can I bring this light back? Can I save them? The angel gazed at me, his voice low but certain. "You are chosen to speak, to warn the souls still faithful. The true light cannot be extinguished as long as there are those who are there to stand for truth." I nodded, feeling the weight on my shoulders shared. I knew I had to return to speak out, even if it meant rejection. I looked at Father Antonio one last time, his resolute eyes like a beacon in the storm. The angel's words echoed in my mind, "Bring the truth to the world, even if the world turns its back. Your mission is to keep the flame alive in the darkness." I nodded, though my heart remained broken. I knew I could not retreat, for if I did not speak, who would? I would not let the faithful souls stand alone. In the deepest hour of the night, when shadows draped the world in a heavy cloak of silence, I lay in my small cell, the convent's stillness pressing against my senses. The darkness was not merely an absence of light, but a tangible weight, as if the earth itself held its breath. Then, without warning, a radiant burst shattered the gloom. It was not the harsh glare of a noonday sun, but a soft enveloping glow, like the first light of dawn after a storm's relentless rage. The warmth of it seeped into my bones, bathing the confines of my soul in a serenity that felt both foreign and eternal. Every corner of my being was illuminated, the shadows of doubt and fear retreating before this celestial beacon. The air shifted, infused with a fragrance I could not name, a sacred blend of smouldering wood, ancient and hallowed, entwined with the delicate sweetness of lilies in bloom. The scent curled around me, grounding my trembling heart while lifting my spirit toward the heavens. It was as if the earth and sky had woven together a tapestry of divine presence, each breath I took drawing me closer to the eternal. The ground beneath me seemed to hum, a subtle vibration that spoke of something sacred descending, something too vast for my mortal frame to fully comprehend. At the heart of the light, a figure took form, his presence both majestic and achingly humble. Jesus stood before me, clothed in a robe of pristine white that shimmered with a purity no earthly thread could match. His countenance was a paradox of strength and tenderness, his face radiating a love so profound it seemed to hold the weight of creation itself. His eyes, deep and fathomless, glistened with tears that carried the sorrows of every soul who had ever wept. Each tear was a mirror, reflecting the anguish I had buried within me, the fears I had never dared to voice. His face bore the marks of a sorrow too vast for me to grasp, yet it was softened by a love that had endured the cross and transcended time. In his hands he held a cross, its wood blackened and smouldering, yet untouched by the flames that danced upon it. The fire was not one of destruction but of life, its flickering tongues radiating a warmth that reached into the depths of my soul. The scent of the burning wood mingled with the lilies, creating an aroma that anchored me to the earth while drawing my heart toward the divine. The warmth from the cross pierced me, a gentle fire that sought out every hidden wound, every quiet pain, and bathed them in a healing light that felt like mercy itself. Before him I could not stand. My knees buckled, and I sank to the ground, my body yielding to the weight of his presence. Every fiber of my being trembled, my soul laid bare in a state of raw humility. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and unbidden, streaming down my cheeks as if each drop were a prayer I had never known how to speak. My heart, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment, bowed in reverence, acknowledging its smallness in the face of the infinite. I was nothing and everything in his presence, a fragile vessel caught in the tide of his boundless love. I dared to lift my eyes to his, though the act felt like a trespass. His expression was pensive, his lips slightly pursed, as though the weight of his sorrow held back his words. His silence was not empty but piercing, a quiet that reverberated through me like 1,000 needles pricking my soul. In that silence, the questions I had buried deep within me rose to the surface, trembling and uncertain. I thought of Pope Leo XIV, the newly enthroned shepherd of the Church, and a fear I had scarcely acknowledged took shape. Was he truly the one chosen by God? Had the sacred throne been touched by human ambition, or was this path ordained by divine will? The words formed in my heart, but I could not bring myself to speak them aloud. Jesus offered no answer, but his eyes, those sorrowful, tear-filled eyes, passed over me, seeing every thought, every fear, every unspoken doubt. His silence was not a rebuke but a mirror, reflecting the torment that churned within me. I felt the weight of his sorrow, a grief that mourned the waywardness of his people, the ambitions that had led them astray from the path of truth. Each glance from him was a revelation, showing me the pain of a world that had forgotten its shepherd. My heart ached under the burden of it, the question of the Pope's legitimacy hanging unanswered, a shadow that grew heavier with each passing moment. Confusion surged within me, a tide of fear and helplessness that threatened to drown my resolve. The possibility that the throne of Peter had been tainted by human hands was a truth too painful to bear, a burden that seemed to crush my spirit. Yet in the midst of this turmoil, a gentle touch broke through the chaos. Jesus reached out, his hand resting upon my bowed head. His palm, marked by the scar of the nail, still bore the faint trace of blood, a living testament to his sacrifice. The warmth from his touch spread through me like a sacred flame, steady and unyielding, burning away the fears that had taken root. When he spoke, his voice was warm and resolute, each word a spark that ignited courage within me. "Speak the truth," he said, "even if the world turns its back." The words were not a command but a sacred trust, a charge that carried the weight of divine purpose. They sank into my soul, each syllable a flame that purified my doubts and kindled a resolve I had not known I possessed. The warmth from his touch lingered, a fire that would never fade, infusing me with a strength that felt both foreign and eternal. My heart, once trembling, now stood firm, its purpose clarified by his words. If God himself had entrusted me with this mission, there could be no turning back. The truth, no matter how painful, would be my charge to bear. Behind him, an angel stood in silent reverence, its form radiant yet subdued in the presence of the Lord. Its wings, folded in humility, shimmered with a light that echoed the glow surrounding Jesus. The angel's presence was a quiet affirmation of the divine will, a reminder that I was not alone in this calling. When I glanced at it, the light from Jesus still enveloped the space, radiant yet tinged with a melancholy that spoke of the world's brokenness. Jesus spoke no more, but his gaze conveyed an unshakable trust. His eyes, though heavy with sorrow, held a glimmer of hope, as if he saw beyond my present struggle to a future where truth would prevail. Slowly he began to withdraw, the light surrounding him folding inward like a sacred cloak. As he retreated, he offered a smile, gentle, fleeting, yet powerful enough to anchor my soul in courage. Then, in an instant he was gone, vanishing into the radiant glow, leaving my cell empty yet brimming with an unshakable hope. The angel stepped forward, its voice deep and solemn, resonant with the authority of heaven. "It is time to return," it said, its words a gentle nudge toward the path ahead. I rose, my legs trembling but my heart ablaze with determination. The encounter had transformed me, stripping away weakness and uncertainty, forging a resolve that could not be shaken. My mission was clear: to return to the world, to speak the truth, to bear witness to the divine will, even if it meant facing rejection or scorn. Standing alone in the fading light, I took a deep breath, the air still carrying the faint echo of lilies and smoldering wood. My heart, once burdened by doubt, now burned with purpose. The truth entrusted to me by the Lord himself would be proclaimed, no matter the cost. The world might turn its back, but I would not be silenced. With every step I took toward the dawn, my resolve grew stronger, a sacred flame that would light my way through the darkness ahead. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying in a hospital bed, the stark white light from the ceiling lamp blinding me. A sharp pain pierced my chest, as if my heart were gripped by an invisible hand. I gasped, my breathing heavy, each heartbeat threatening to burst. The surroundings gradually came into focus: the pungent smell of antiseptic, the steady beeping of the monitor, and the coldness of the hospital bed. A familiar voice spoke beside me, gentle but laced with unrelenting worry. "Maria, you're alive." I turned to see Sister Lucia clutching my hand, her eyes red and still glistening with unshed tears. I managed a weak smile, but my chest tightened, causing me to groan softly. To live again from the brink of death, was it a miracle or a burden? I couldn't answer, only knowing that my soul was still trembling, as if caught somewhere between reality and the unseen realm. I softly asked Sister Lucia what happened. Choking back tears, she recounted how I had collapsed upon hearing news of Pope Leo XIV, my heart stopping for several minutes. The doctors had done everything to revive me, and then, like a miracle, my heart began beating again. They said I had returned from the dead. But I knew this was no ordinary return. My mind still echoed with the voice of God, his sorrowful gaze lingering in my heart. I felt the mission I had been given to warn the world, to speak out even if the world turned its back. Without hesitation, I asked Sister Lucia for paper and a pen. My hands trembled as I gripped the pen, each stroke carving into my heart. I wrote everything from my encounter with the angel to the foretold future events, and the sorrowful eyes of God when he spoke of the new pope. The scent of ink and old paper filled the air, the room growing still, with only the flickering candlelight on the hospital table. I wrote like one possessed, each line flowing like blood from the depths of my soul, steeped in pain and truth. Not a single detail was omitted, for I knew the warning had to be clear enough to awaken souls slumbering in a world of deceit. When I stopped writing, my hands were numb, cold sweat beading on my forehead. I looked at the pages dense with writing, as if gazing into my own heart. I handed the letter to Sister Lucia, my gaze resolute. "Help me send this to the church, so they can warn the faithful." Sister Lucia hesitated, but I met her eyes with unwavering determination. "We cannot stay silent. The truth must be proclaimed, even if they call us mad." She nodded, carefully folding the letter before quietly leaving the room. I watched her go, a sense of relief washing over me, as if an invisible burden had been lifted. Gratitude filled me, but the worry did not fade. I knew this journey would not be easy. I closed my eyes, whispering a prayer. "Lord, grant me the strength to stand firm against the storms to come. Illuminate the souls lost in darkness, so they may see the light of truth amidst the shadows of deceit." When I opened my eyes, I saw the candlelight flickering, as if smiling. I wondered if the world would dare to awaken as darkness loomed. I wondered if anyone would have the courage to face the truth. "Amen," I whispered, a reminder to myself that I would not retreat. I would warn the world, even if it meant facing rejection or persecution. For the light of truth must be kindled, so that no one remains lost in the dark. As the pale afternoon light streamed through the high, arched windows of the convent, I was summoned to the meeting room, a chamber rarely entered, even by those of us who had given our lives to silence and prayer. My footsteps echoed down the stone corridor, each one bringing me closer to what felt like judgment. I paused at the heavy oak door, my heart a storm of conflicting emotions, resolve clashing against fear. When the hinges groaned and the door creaked open, I stepped inside, uncertain if I was walking into a tribunal or a reckoning. The room held the weight of centuries. Behind thick walls that muffled the sounds of the world outside, the air was thick with the scent of beeswax, and old wood, an aroma that seemed to have seeped into every stone, every page of every ancient document stored there. Candles set along a long, polished table flickered with a fragile glow. Their flames swayed as if unsettled by the tension that permeated the chamber, casting long, uncertain shadows that gathered in the corners like silent witnesses. At the head of the table sat the Mother Superior, her hands folded, her back straight. The white of her coif framed a face lined with care, her eyes solemn and steady, but hiding a quiet worry. Her presence was one of both strength and sorrow. To her right, Father Lucas loomed like an immovable statue. His expression was unreadable, carved into harsh lines by years of spiritual authority and unbending discipline. His eyes bore into me, dark and searching, as though trying to unravel the contents of my soul with a glance. At the far end, Sister Lucia sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her fingers pale. She dared to look at me only once, and then quickly away, as if afraid that prolonged contact might unearth something terrifying. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant toll of the convent bell marking the hour, and the soft crackle of candle flames licking the air. When the Mother Superior spoke, her voice was quiet but unwavering, each word deliberate, each syllable heavy with unspoken consequences. "Maria Teresa," she said, using my full name. A rare formality, a sign that this was no ordinary summons. I bowed my head slightly in acknowledgement, the gesture feeling small and inadequate. My breath caught in my throat. Beneath my habit, my hands trembled and then stilled. I knew why I had been called. I knew what was coming. Father Lucas leaned forward, his eyes locked onto mine. His voice cut through the silence like a knife, sharp, slow, and measured. "We are here," he began, "because of what you have said, what you have claimed. You spoke of visions, of Pope Leo XIV, of secret religious dealings, of miracles that were not divine, but constructed. Each word struck like a hammer against glass, fracturing the already delicate peace. He listed each accusation without pause, each point a blade turned inward. I felt exposed beneath his scrutiny, but I did not flinch. I lowered my gaze, not in shame, but to steady myself under the gravity of the moment. Behind the voices, I could hear the scratch of Sister Lucia's pen. The sound was dry and incessant, marking each word for the record, for history or judgment. I could not tell. A part of me wished she would stop, wished this moment would be allowed to dissolve into silence and be forgotten. But deep within, I knew it must be recorded. The truth had to be spoken. When I finally raised my voice, it was barely above a whisper. "What I have seen," I said, "was shown to me. I speak not from fear or desire, but from obedience. What I see, I must say." The Mother Superior let out a slow breath, her lips drawn in a tight line. Her eyes held both kindness and warning. "The Vatican will send its inquiry," she said. "They will not take your claims lightly. If what you say cannot be verified, there will be consequences for you and for all of us." The implication was clear. Silence would be safer for the convent, for the church, for me. But I could not betray the fire that had been placed inside me. I could not pretend that what I had seen was a figment of the imagination or the trick of a tired mind. Father Lucas spoke again, this time his voice lower, harsher. "Do you understand the danger you place us in? These words, your visions, could lead to isolation, to suspicion. You risk destroying what has endured for generations." His words were intended to frighten me. Perhaps once they would have. But something had changed. A flame had been kindled within me, a quiet, unshakable clarity that no human judgment could snuff out. I lifted my eyes to his. "I cannot lie," I said calmly. "Even if it brings ruin, I must tell the truth. To remain silent would be a betrayal of the very faith I vowed to uphold." He stared at me for a long moment, his lips curled ever so slightly in a look that mingled pity with disdain. "Truth," he muttered, "is a burden the world does not always want to carry." The Mother Superior rose slowly, her gesture signaling the end of the meeting. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Sometimes silence is not cowardice, Maria Teresa. Sometimes it is mercy." I nodded respectfully, but inside I knew I could not heed her advice. The truth, once revealed, demanded to be carried to the end, even if the road led to exile. That night I returned to my small cell. The candle on my desk burned steadily, its glow comforting. I sat down, pulling paper toward me. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the solemnity of the task. I took the pen and began to write. Every word poured from me like a confession. I wrote of the strange dream that had first shaken me awake, of the angel who spoke not with words, but with truth so powerful it left no room for doubt. I wrote of what I had seen, miracles staged for power, holy names used for dark purposes, and warnings whispered through divine visions. Time passed unnoticed. The candle burned low. When I finished, the pages before me were filled with a truth I could no longer keep hidden. I folded the letter carefully, sealing it with prayer and conviction. The first time I had written, I sent the letter through official channels, but it was intercepted, silenced. This time I would be the messenger myself. I addressed it to Eternal Bible Stories, a publication I believed might risk truth over tradition. Then, before dawn, I crept from the convent. The gate let out a groan as it opened, but the darkness beyond seemed to welcome me, wrapping itself around me like a cloak of courage. The street lamps flickered, mist clung to the cobblestones, my breath came out in clouds, the cold biting at my skin, but the fire inside me burned brighter than ever. At the post office I hesitated only briefly, the letter clutched tightly in my hand. I thought of what might follow: condemnation, rejection, perhaps even disgrace. But then I remembered the vision, the sorrow in the eyes of the angel, the echo of God's voice. Speak the truth, even if the world turns its back on you. I slid the letter into the mailbox, the soft thud of paper on metal ringing like a bell in my chest. A burden lifted, though it was replaced by another, the weight of having spoken, of having chosen the narrow path. As I made my way back to the convent, the world was still cloaked in darkness, but in my heart, light had already broken through. I did not know what would come next, whether I would be cast out, labeled a heretic, or ignored entirely. But I knew this: I had spoken the truth, and truth, once born, is a light that cannot be put out. Whatever came, I would face it. I was no longer afraid. If you are still here, it means your soul feels something. Sister Maria's testimony is her own experience. This is not a condemnation or judgment, but a message of love and liberation. Receive this story with a positive and tolerant attitude. Your job is to listen and turn to God. May God and the saints enlighten and guide the new Pope to lead and preserve the Church that God has given us on this earth according to His will. If you find this story meaningful, please share it with those around you to spread understanding and love together. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments section. If you feel prompted by the Holy Spirit, consider clicking the super thanks button, the heart icon below the video, and making a gift. No act of generosity, big or small, is forgotten in the kingdom of God. Your gifts fuel the fire, helping us bring light, warning, and hope to those who are drowning in deception. From forgotten village churches to bustling cities, your support reaches farther than you think. God bless you.